I got in touch because all this stuff with Soul Survivor kind of got me thinking, actually, I want to talk about this. No one else is. And I was thinking, well, who are the people that were significant to me when I was about that age? So we're talking 20, 25 years ago. And the song you wrote, The Lord is Gracious and Compassionate, was significant to me back then, but also more recently. So I remember using it, like I do worship and play guitar and all that sort of stuff. And I remember playing it in all sorts of places, environments. I think even in my like sixth forms at school in Romford. And it seemed like, and people kind of related to it. Now I then used it more personally, more recently, and it kind of sets the tone in some ways, because one of the most challenging things I've ever done was I was working with the UN in Iraq, and we were the first like non-soldiers to go through Mosul after it had been liberated from ISIS. So we were in the old city, in the old town, and it had been completely decimated. You know, I tripped over a person's rib cage that was poking out the ground. We saw faces still, the hair still grows on faces. There were fat cats around, and the stink was unbelievable. And though I was in a small group, I was with my camera, so I was doing a job there. But you become, when you're in a horrific environment, everyone around you, however much you know them, become irrelevant. You're on your own, even if you're in a group. I was on my own, and the song again that I went back to was the song you wrote. And it became a really interesting, and in other environments, you know, there's that habit of saying the Lord's Prayer. You know, I used to always say the Lord's Prayer in the shower every morning, because that was like getting me into, you know, a habit. But your song acted like a grounding for me, where I felt incredibly alone. It was like, okay, God, I need you here. And I haven't been to church for years properly, like as a member. But my faith hasn't changed. And that song, both the kind of affirmation of who God is, taken from, you know, Psalm 145, the affirmation of who God is, but then also praise the Lord, O my soul. That kind of just tell you, you know, telling yourself what to do. And I thought, you know, I never imagined I'd have a chat with you. But the reason I got in touch was there is, however much I see other people talking really negatively about this stuff, there's some massive positives out of music, out of the kind of evangelical, charismatic thing that I still draw on when I'm in the most difficult situation I've been in.
Yeah.
So I kind of thought I wanted to frame our conversation, not do a right, everything's bad, but actually talk about, you know, art, music, the stuff that really added a depth to my relationship with God is still there, and your song really helped and just came to the fore again, you know, a few years ago. So that's so.
Wow.
I mean, do you want to talk about that song to start with?
Well, first of all, you know, thanks for having me and getting in touch. It's really nice. It was lovely to hear from you, and I'm interested in the overall subject matter of what you're, you know, addressing and stuff. And I feel really aggrieved when I hear of people who have suffered, you know, under the abuse of, you know, especially church stuff, which really shouldn't be like that. You know, the church should be completely opposite to that, really a safe place.
Yeah.
So I'm really sorry to hear that. And I've had my own trauma, I guess you'd say, not in the same way as others, but you know, we could get into that. But yeah, hearing that story about the song is it's very humbling actually for me, because you're not the first person to express things like this about that song and what it's meant to them. And so yeah, I mean, you know, as you asked, I wrote the song in 1989 actually. I was in a college at the time, and I was just reading the Psalms, and and that tune just came into my head. I can't really take much credit for it really, because it just came into my head as I was reading it, and I ran down the hallway and found a piano, and I just wrote it, wrote the tune down quick, and then in the morning we had a time where we gathered together, and we just sang some songs together and said some prayers and stuff, and I shared the song uh, as raw as it was, literally just written it. I wrote it as a round at first, interestingly enough, and it doesn't get sung much like that, but it actually works as a round. When the praise the Lord bit comes in and everyone else sings the other part, it kind of like goes on top of each other.
Yeah.
Anyway, I sang it, and there was a fella there who was on his way to Uganda, and it was at the Uganda it was the Idi Amin times, the masses of skulls being piled up outside towns, and whatever, just horrendous things happening. And so this was the background, and he took it there, and he said, "Do you mind if I take this song?" And I just said, "Yeah." I'd literally just written it. I had no idea that it was any good even, or anything. I just had no idea. It was just a very pure thing. And so that happened, and then some years later, I was playing in a band called the Wesley Brothers. We recorded that song, and it went onto a record. It was a 12-minute long version.
Wow.
we used to do the song in pubs, like I played a lot in pubs and stuff, and it's kind of good as a kind of like a bluesy soul song.
Totally.
We would do it in that form.
Yeah.
And anyway, the song grew. I think of it that it grew wings, and it just started flying around the world. I didn't promote it as such myself. I didn't do anything with it. I just literally just sang it in the live situations that I had to do.
Yeah.
And then Vineyard Music wanted to record it and stuff, and I was moving to Canada, so I ended up not being able to sing it, which is kind of ironic as well. So Wendy sang it, did a lovely job of it, and and this song just went out there. And but the pertinent thing in relation to what you just said, right, was that, and why I mentioned that it went to Uganda, is because years and years later, I have a very dear friend called Ezra Kwizera, and Ezra is a musician from Rwanda, and he lived through the genocide that happened in Rwanda, and he had to flee to Uganda as a child, and he told me that the only reason he survived was because he was so short that when they were shooting everybody in the crowds running away, he just didn't get hit by the bullets, and so he survived.
Yeah.
And it was a horrendous story. But then he said to me, because he was really thrilled to meet me. This was in Canada. We met in Canada. He married a Canadian and moved to Canada. And he said to me, in Rwanda, that song became like an anthem of hope to people, and it became a massive song in Rwanda. And you can't go anywhere where people don't know that song, and they, never mind 12-minute version, they sing it for hours and hours. They just keep singing it over and over and over again. And when you think of a genocide or the horror of that, and then those lyrics, the Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, he's rich in love, he's good to everything he's made, like the whole thing of forgiveness and restoration takes on a whole nother meaning, So what you experienced is, I'm really thankful that I hear these kind of stories a lot. And even in my own life, we can talk about that a bit more, because
Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't really know what the song was about when I wrote it, really. It was just some words on a page, I hadn't lived enough life to know what it really meant,
Yeah. So and then so what is it? And it's interesting to use a song to kind of frame our conversation a bit, but I think where it's going to go. But what is it? do you still play it now? Like, is it like a, oh, it's great, it's good for you, but I've kind of had enough of it now.
No, no, the opposite actually. I love the song. I can honestly tell you this, that I have sometimes, looked down at the music sheet, and it has my name on the top that I wrote it, and then I'm like, oh yeah, you wrote that, didn't you? Like it feels like it's just part of the fabric of the church's kind of like vernacular, if you like, modern stuff, and it doesn't hold something like where I think, oh yeah, you're amazing, you wrote that song. In fact, I'll tell you a really funny story. In the early days of writing it, I went to this they used to have these things called Bible weeks. I don't know if you ever went on such a thing.
Well, like Spring Harvest, that kind of thing.
It wasn't that, but it was like that, yeah.
Right.
And there was, a few thousand people there, and they're singing this song, right? And I tell you, it sounds amazing when you wrote a song and then you hear thousands of people singing it. It's like, wow, So I walked into I walked in there with my wife, and I was like, I was walking around with my head as big as a balloon, like a barrage balloon. And because I was thinking, everyone here knows that I wrote this song. Of course, no one knows. No one cares. Who cares? It doesn't even matter. Especially in those days where there wasn't such a celebrity culture around songwriters and worship leaders and stuff.
Yeah.
And so anyway, they told me that it had been recorded and that it was going to be put on a record that was going to come out as part of this thing,
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, this is awesome. So my wife and I went to Bolton or somewhere, or wherever it was, to go to the studio to hear this amazing recording they had an orchestra.
Oh, wow.
It was quite thing,
big.
And and then when they pulled up all the tracks on the mixing board, all you could hear in the background was this noise, like this high pitched noise.
Yeah.
And it was on every single track on the recording, but only on my song. And
wow.
I was like, I just can't even believe this, like I was, I got into my victim mentality.
Yeah, of course.
Just, whatever. God doesn't, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But I thought it was just ironic, that,
What was the sound from? Do you know what it was?
I think it was just, a technical issue.
Yeah.
A microphone or something to do with the recording process. It just didn't. Yeah, so it was never on there. So it took. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, it got recorded by the Vineyard in, I think it was 1998 or something.
Yeah.
Well, it'd been around for years before it ever got recorded. Well, we recorded it on a little release, but it didn't go very far. But
sure.
Anyway, yeah, it's just interesting.
and I think and like. As I've looked at what you do now, there's this thing, there's a connection which I found. So it came, like you said, 1998. So I was 18. So for me, that's like proper music year. When you're 18, that's it's not only the time you probably get to your peak of your ability very often, but also it's when you want to attract girls. It's it's also the time where I was starting to feel more confident in my leading of worship as well. So it came out, and it was like, but it does that song specifically, and there are other songs as well, and we don't need to talk about specific songs because we're doing that with yours, but. There's something, and you've said, I mean, that's phenomenal about the stuff in Rwanda, that it's a song of their it was a song of their churches, and their people. But what is it like? What went wrong? Using music as our framing, because it just makes sense, and I feel like there's I really respect what you're doing. I've looked at what you've been doing recently. Where's this disconnect from a song that where I felt desperately alone, where I saw nothing of God, basically, in Mosul. But the song that you'd written, the melody. It wasn't just the words. That's what's really important. It was the melody that got into my head, right? It's not like I was saying Lord's Prayer in Cliff Richard's melody. it was the melody that you'd put to that did something for me, right? What
Yeah.
where have we got, like, I'm out of touch at the moment with church stuff, but when I go back and we've got a Ukrainian woman living with us, I took her to our local church and it just felt like a nostalgia trip. None of the music that was being played, and I don't care about production value. I'm not going to go, oh, that sounds a little bit off or whatever. None of it did the same. I'd just been to Ukraine actually, and I went to this church, and it was a complete mismatch.
Yeah.
Why has it gone? Where have we gone wrong?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's we could talk for a long, long time, couldn't we, about this?
Yeah.
But this is an interesting thing, because when Russia invaded Ukraine,
Yeah.
I too became interested, and I felt for the people, and it's beautiful actually. We're just showing the work. We have an art gallery in our building here, and we're just showing the work of two Ukrainian artists who they're refugees here, which is really cool. But I actually went online and I listened to the worship service from the Kiev Vineyard Church,
Right.
and you can go online and listen to it. And what's beautiful about it is that it's very, very simple. It's just a couple of guys and a girl or whatever, a little band thing, ensemble, and they're playing away. And obviously at that time when I was watching it, especially, they were a besieged city.
Yeah.
And here they were trying to find refuge in worshiping God, and there was just something very beautiful about it, and I think if we think about, I've listened to some of your other videos when I was thinking about this, to see what kind of the tenor was of what was going on and stuff.
Thanks.
And there's a lot of people who they're kind of disillusioned, aren't they, by what's going on and stuff now and whatever. But I think if I think about, if you say what's going wrong, I think because I too have had my time of total disillusionment of the church, and I was involved a lot in the things that are hard for people, like the conference stuff and the big thing and all that. I've been a celebrity in that scene to some degree, and so, but I've also come out of the other side of that at times, thinking, what is this all about? Like, you know what I mean?
Sorry.
Did you want? You go
Yeah,
ahead.
no, I was gonna sort of go into that sec. So I know you used to play with Kevin Prosh, and he was someone, and I remember seeing him. Well, I think it might have been you too, playing at Soul Survivor at one of the festivals. And and I'm not sure whether I don't know if it would have been maybe 1999, something like that, maybe 2000, something like that. And he played at the church I used to sort of be part of and lead worship in and stuff like that in Collier Road. And there was something about what he did that was still something different. And there's almost like, and yeah, he's American and all that sort of stuff, but it felt very much about the expression of music rather than the importance of corporate worship. Do you know what I mean? I can't put but there was something where it wasn't about all being together and singing in this kind of following the thing on the overhead projector. But there was something about you guys are putting together an environment where something in me that I can't express sings something. And that's not the same as what's going on at the moment, I don't think. Some places, of course it is, and you're involved in that in Canada, but I'd like to kind of talk.
Yeah.
I would love to understand what was it that you were involved in that you became disillusioned or hurt by, but also can we try and figure out what the value in it is that we might have lost or we've missed a little bit.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so I didn't play with Kevin at Soul Survivor. That was the first time I think I can remember meeting him was there, or
Right.
if I remember. Okay, that's a whole nother story, but anyway, yeah, we did do lots of, well, quite a number of shows together and stuff, and worship events and things like that. And we went out to the States to spend some time with them when they were out there. I think that era was, there was something very magical about that time, in the sense that there was a kind of a bit of an explosion of creativity, and in certain circles, a kind of something very fresh musically, and yeah, it was interesting because there was a lot of improvisational stuff happening. And I still find this today, actually, that people are sometimes afraid of improvisation, especially in a worship setting. But actually, everyone will go with it if it's led really well, and if it is genuinely kind of like creative and corporate, if you like, and something that involves people. You see that at just concerts anyway.
Yeah, of
People
course.
love going to see jam bands and stuff. That's all a big part of it. So that's you know the styles of worship is a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
Um, my my particular um, I still really think it's important to have that kind of free form stuff, as well. Personally, I love it, but I don't always do that in a corporate setting. I like to do that just privately with people, with friends and stuff as well, and that, and it, in my experience, when you add that to a congregational setting, often it's very limiting, actually, as a musician, because the very nature of getting together to worship God together is that you're getting together to worship God together. You're not coming to hear Graham do a rip-roaring guitar solo, necessarily,
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a difference there. But yeah, that honestly, I would love to just talk about that. Maybe we do it another time.
Yeah.
But I think in the context, like, this is something that saddens me, and I know it does you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing these podcast things.
Yeah.
And that is the fact that a lot of people have kind of like got hurt, and a lot of people are now they just don't want anything to do with it. They're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, really. You know what I mean? And that is sad. And so my journey with that really wasn't a musical one at all, really. Like, because I've always been afforded an opportunity to be able to play the music I like to play, and people have enjoyed it. And if they don't, you just don't get hired again to do it. It doesn't. I'm not looking for a gig, really. So it
Yeah.
doesn't really bother me. Like, I've got lots of gigs. And so if a certain group doesn't like the way that you do it, to me, it's just like, oh well, it's fine. It doesn't matter too much. But the part that I found difficult for me, it was, it's difficult to talk about. I came to a point a few years ago where a dear friend of mine, we would meet regularly, like every week, and he would try and help me with my kind of like disillusionment with, for me, what I call charismania now. You know what I mean? A kind of quite somewhat of an abuse of the different gifts and stuff, and what some of your other guests have talked about the manipulation that happens sometimes in those contexts and stuff and all that. And I remember my friend said to me one time, and he's not just a friend, he's also someone who can help people with this stuff. And he said, you're struggling from PTSD. And I was like, what? Like, I was just a music leader in the church. I'm not suffering from post-traumatic stress. And he said, no, you are. That's actually what's happening. And that's why you get triggered so much when you go back into these environments, and why, you know, why there's certain things that you just can't do anymore, you can't go to, whatever, you know. And I remember what happened to me was that I I started. My wife. It's a long story, and I'm going to cut bits out. But my wife started going to a church in our town that was mainly working with homeless people, and she kept saying to me, "You should come to this church. It's really good." And I was like, "I don't really want to go there. You know, I kind of like my tribe that I was in. I was kind of in a still in my mind, I was in a kind of Vineyard music tribe, if you like, and I thought I don't really want to do that, you know. Even though I wasn't doing anything for about 5 years, I just sat in the back because I was just kind of traumatized.
Yeah.
And she she kind of encouraged me to go, and then I used to go and I used to sit there in this church, in the same way, just kind of sit there and enjoy it. And it was lovely because lots of people would share, especially homeless people. They would just share their lives, and it was so raw and so unpretentious and just so incredible that I didn't ever feel like I had to share. I didn't have anything to share because my life was just like so shallow, seemingly, compared to what these people were living with every day, you know. And then I remember one day the guy who led the singing there, he came up to me and he said, "I'm so embarrassed." And I said, "What do you mean you're embarrassed?" And he goes, "Well, I just realized that you've been in this sitting in this church for however long, and we sing so many songs that you wrote, and I didn't even know you were sitting here in the church." You know, and I was like, I can't even tell you how great that makes me feel, because who cares who wrote the song and who was the leader and who produced it and what label was it on and whatever. You know, it was just this beautiful simplicity of people just coming together. They were more concerned if you had a peanut butter and jam sandwich and a coffee than they were in who was the prophet who said this, and who was the guy who tickled some guy's ass with a feather in a prophecy. You know, like really weird, you know, all of that nonsense, you know what I mean, was going on, you know what I mean? And it was so beautiful and pure, and
Yeah.
it gave me hope, you know. And then after a while, they asked me, once they knew I could do that, because they didn't even know that I was a musician or a worship leader or anything, you know. So they said, "Oh, can you help us?" And here I am now, many years later, and I now work in that community. And it's my role now to encourage artists. Like on the streets, there are so many talented people, as you might know yourself, you know.
Yeah.
And this idea that, you know, the marketing of worship music, which has happened, you know, the corruption of it all. And I feel afraid in some ways to even talk to you, because I feel like, oh, I have to be careful what I say, because I know too much, you know what I mean, about the nonsense that goes on behind the scenes, you know.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I also see the purity of really good intentioned people who sometimes got caught up in the machine of it all, you know.
Yeah.
But and then others who are just charlatans. You know, there are many charlatans out there, and if the church general people knew how it all worked and the business of it, many of us wouldn't sing a lot of the songs that we sing, because you would think, oh, this is not pure. It's not as pure as it was. So, like you were asking the question about, you know, how do we get back to something? Well, I think some of that is just the purity of it again. You know, like the reason why people write songs. You know, like now I have no outlet for my songs. I'm not with Vineyard Music. I still write really nice songs and good songs, but they have no outlet anymore. But it doesn't mean that I'm not doing it anymore. You know what I mean? It's just like one day maybe God will give some wings to one of these other songs and it will start doing good. I don't know. But it doesn't matter. It's more about, like, when I leave this conversation, I'll be doing karaoke and an open mic with all the people that are homeless on the street, and it'll be beautiful. It'll be messy, but it will be beautiful. I led an event with the Prime Minister of Canada a while back. It was amazing. Here I'm there with all these amazing dignitaries and world leaders and whatever. The next morning, I came to Metro here where I work and led the music with people who are homeless. It was just like, it's just
That's
how
what
it should be.
It is how it should be. So the two things that you've sort of said, and just a quick question: is your son Lucas managing to restart the camera each time?
Are you restarting the camera, Luke?
Yeah, restarting.
He's just going to do it now. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
So the two things that have stood out from what you're saying is, one, a friend of yours saying to you that you've got PTSD.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're told that, you don't just take it. I mean, it's like if someone tells you you've got a cold, it's because your nose is running. It would be what were this kind of symptoms of PTSD for you to? So this conversation could be really useful to other people, right? We don't go through. We're not all so unique that we all have our own experiences. There will be a bunch of people watching this who will think, "Do I have that?" So the first question is, can we talk about that? Are you happy to? And then the other thing that you've been saying is about purity, or it needs to be pure, and not using the word purity in the kind of classic evangelical way, because none of us are that. We're only that, But in terms of that PTSD thing, because I mean, I've just said, I've been to two really horrible environments in Ukraine, but specifically Iraq. I've worked with I work in one of the biggest forces charities in the country and film with them. I've met with guys who have experienced PTSD through war at another level. I understand PTSD, and I've been thinking about making a film about it actually. But who are you and I, or you? Who are you to say that you've got the same thing as a guy who watched his mate's head come off, from a sniper?
Yeah, and that is exactly why I denied that I could have such a thing, because I don't trivialize that.
I'm not suggesting.
Yeah, I know you're not, but I'm just saying, for me, I really honor that. My grandfather was in the Second World War. He got decorated with the DCM, and yet he could never talk about the experiences that he had, and he would never go to the Legion for events because he said there's nothing to celebrate, And so I really respect that, and I really honor that. But at the same time, I think what happened. See, purity and this thing go together, right? Because I have tried, if you look in the scriptures, there's a lot about integrity. Right? Integrity is a very, very, it's an underestimated, under talked about thing, right? Which is absolutely essential for people to be integrous. And what I've learned over the years, that integrity isn't like what we were just laughing about purity, about just doing everything right and never swearing and never whatever it might be. Like, integrity is being the same person on the outside as you are on the inside. And if you look in the Psalms, like, one of the things that comes out there, it's integrity is something that people pray for. They say, grant to me integrity because my hope is in you. And so this idea of like having hope in God also means that we have to also be integrous, and we have to be realistic and real about who we really, really are. And so what happened for me in that world of charismania was I do believe that God does charismatic things. I believe he created the whole universe with one word. It seems, it's just crazy when you think about how the creativeness of God and the expression of God in that sense. But at the same time, what I found as well was that I saw so many things, like for instance, people prophesying things over me that they knew beforehand. We had a conversation backstage about, and then they would come up in front of all these people, hundreds of people, and they would pretend that they had just heard from God about something that I was going to do in the future. I had a word from God that you're going to be working with a indigenous person. This happened, and I'm like, that's bullshit. I just told you that is
Right.
what I'm going to be doing next. That's the next project that I'm working on with someone. And now you're trying to make yourself look amazing,
Yeah.
And I laughed. I made the joke about the angel feathers and all that, but I had a dream last night that God has given us this building because we're gonna be a light to the nations. We're gonna all that
Yeah.
nonsense.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I'm sitting there thinking, no, you, it's nothing to do with having a word for it. There's lots of reasons why that person was saying that, which I don't want to go into, but it was nothing to do with a prophecy or whatever. It was about trying to maintain their grip on something that they were afraid they were going to lose. So they're trying to pretend that they've had some kind of a prophecy. And this, when you're in those circles, it goes on and on and on. You hear it a lot. You hear this kind of nonsense. So you're trying to be integrous and you're trying to be true to who you really are. And, writing songs and whatever. And, and you're doing your thing and you're not sitting in the green room that they've given you because you want to be with the people. And you're not just getting up there singing all your own songs because it's going to sell loads of albums and blah, but there's so many mechanisms that happen in that world, the industry of worship is huge, you know what I mean? There's a lot of money to be made in it. Not that I made lots, but there is. And so the trauma is realizing that you're trying to be true to yourself, but there's a lot of charlatans, and there's a lot of things going on around you that's not true. So I've actually left quite a few churches myself, just simply because I cannot be disingenuous. I have to be true to who I really am. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's probably, and then the trauma aspect of it is when you go back to those places and you're really triggered by what's going on, then that's the trauma stress part. And that's obviously not as severe as someone witnessing someone having their head cut off or something, but it's still trauma. And you still have to address it, and you have to have some, be kind to yourself and allow yourself to heal from that stuff. And for me, what I've did, I mentioned going to churches and sitting in the back row. I actually went to an Anglican church for a while, which was liturgical, and I literally really enjoyed just like literally reading the same thing every week, and it gave me a sense of comfort, and it gave me a sense of like stability in the chaos of all that stuff. It was like, oh, this is really great, and I really like that. And I think I'm a bit of a kind of a mystical, kind of a Catholic-minded person, really. I'm not a Catholic, but I do like the idea that not everything adds up, and that there's a mysticism to life that's really important, and a mystery of our faith, that it doesn't all add up. And that's the problem with the charismatic thing, is that, the other areas of trauma are in things like praying for people to get healed and then they die, and praying for buildings to happen and then you lose the building, praying for a church to exist and then it closes down. Just things that you're told are going to all happen if you believe and whatever. And it's like, no, it doesn't happen like that. We had a baby that died. I remember holding my little baby and here I am. I'm thinking, okay, so I've been told that if you do this, this, and this, and this, then God will do this, 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 and this. And then what happens is that you have a dead child, and you're holding that child, and you're saying, okay, so I did this, this, and this, and this, but this is what happened, and now you've got to deal with that. Like, and that's really important that we deal with that, you know, and that's when you get to know. For me, like, the Lord is gracious. The Lord is compassionate. The Lord is slow to anger. He is rich in love. He is everything He said He is. But we're not. Like, you know what I mean? We're not everything that we say that we are. You know, and I try and live integrity, but sometimes I'm not. You know, like,
Yeah.
we're human.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, to your point, and going back to like Kevin Prosh, I mean, I remember when he was at this church, I don't know how old he was. I don't know, probably really old, like my age now. um, but I was 20 or whatever, and he started coming on to the girl I really fancied. He was like, "Oh yeah, why didn't?" Because he's I don't know what he's like now, but he it all got sort of spoken about him being a massive womanizer, right? And I remember him coming on to this girl, and I fancied her for ages. And I just thought, hang on, in my head, I couldn't do what you just said. I couldn't do the charismatic thing that does this. He needs to be like this. He needs to be this, like, got it all right, you know, salesman for Jesus. You know, tie up, and he's not. He's coming on to this girl that's half his age, and I fancy her. And what's he even doing? And like you're saying, we get it so wrong. And that, I'm not saying I'm excusing someone that's a hypocrite, or I'm not excusing sin at all, but we get it wrong. We get it massively wrong. And the environment that we set for ourselves is something as heartbreaking as the story you just said, or whether it's just expecting each other to be perfect or pure, using that in that way, then we floor ourselves. And so, I mean, art, as you said, art comes out of pain. Art comes out of friction. Art comes out of imagination or dreaming. Art comes out of mystery or curiosity. And if you just say it all needs to be like this, that's, for me, that's where this. So, I mean, I watched that. Well, I watched the film that you made, the music that you put together on the lap steel about Israel and Palestine. And it just, I was finding it a little bit hard to watch, and then I was like, I'm not sure I want to watch this. Not because it was hard, just because what you were doing was you'd somehow got through to me a little bit. and that's what we need to be doing. And the other point, to your point though, to those charlatans, to the malevolent kind of narcissist who just basically wants to buy another new Range Rover, or what the equivalent is in Nashville. Well, I don't know what you buy in Nashville. what's the big truck of choice? But they're not interested in that kind of rough person getting it wrong. They need the salesman with a guitar to sing their worship tunes, don't they? Yeah. And then as soon as it goes wrong, they're like, I've lost that, you know. I was thinking about speaking with you, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to be talking with you about, and I was thinking, I'm quite using that term, like salesman for Jesus. And you can visualize a lot of the worship leaders who kind of fit that mold, whether they have integrity or not. I'm not judging individuals at all, but what I am judging is and I thought I'm being a bit too. I feel like I've got a YouTube channel that I'm playing with, that I'm trying to understand. I'm meeting with people. I don't need to be soft about this. I've got nothing to lose, like literally nothing. And I thought, actually, I just think the industry's a crock. I think it's a crock of shit. I'm pretty sure. The more I talk about it, the more I understand it. It's worth a heck of a lot of money to a few people that don't. But it doesn't. I don't know who it benefits. And speaking with you, I mean, just what you said, that you played to the Prime Minister and then you played with the homeless. And that's not for the story. That's because that's what you do. You know?
Mm.
I don't know. That's
Yeah. I mean, it's a hard one. Like when I first became a believer, that was in 1982, and I joined this little house church, you know, and we met in a little gym, school gym. It was funny. The chair. It was a primary school, so the chairs were all really little. So we had these adults all sitting on these little primary school chairs, you know,
yeah.
and it was so hokey, but it was so beautiful as well. It was just pure, you know what I mean? We sang some songs that we had in a book, you know. It was about, I don't know, 50 or 60 songs that we had there, you know, and I laugh about this, you know, they weren't their real names, but there was like Mildred on the 12 string that only had 9 strings because she didn't know you could buy 3 more, you know, and whatever. And then Hilda was on the flute.
Yeah.
And it was just pure. It wasn't about the music. It wasn't about the songs. It wasn't about celebrities. It was just, I went there as a new believer and I just used to stand there with my eyes shut and concentrate on Jesus and just worship Jesus, you know. And when the music stopped, I would still be standing there focused on Jesus, you know what I mean? And someone would have to pull me by the back of my jacket and say, you need to sit down, the worship's finished. And I thought, well, I haven't finished, you know, like it was very pure and beautiful. And then there definitely has been something that's happened where it's become commercialized, and you know the names, the celebrities have become important, and you know Vineyard music was also part of that as well. You know they got to a point where they're making records every month, and you know all that kind of stuff, and it became a machine. I mean, I wasn't so involved with that, but you know I definitely saw that happening, and you know there's basically 2 good songs and 14 average songs that on those records, really. You know, it's just because they had to keep doing it. People's livelihood is at stake, and there's all kinds of reasons, right? And I think what you're seeing now, I mean, I'm like you, Sam, right? I'm not involved with that anymore. I wish you could come and see what we do here, because
I'd love to.
It's the furthest thing away from that celebrity corporate thing. You know, there's people keep trying to pull you back into that, but we really fight hard not to be like that. You know what I mean? And we have a band, and I try and do the music really good and whatever, and we have a good time. But we're not expecting an orgasm in worship every week. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like, you know, we're just expressing our love to God, and it's part of the whole thing, you know. And so, in fairness, you know, I do know some of the celebrities personally, and I personally haven't found any. I mean, dear old Kevin there. I mean, his life is unraveled. I don't know what's going on with him. I haven't seen him for a long time, but I didn't have any idea that what was going on there when I was doing things with him. You know, I just found him to be an inspiring person for the reasons we talked about before. But many of the ones I know, they have integrity. They're not disingenuous. They are caught up sometimes in that machine and whatever of it. But I mean, dear old Matt Redman there from the Soul Survivor. I mean, I knew Matt when he was a young boy, like a teenager. I think he was a late teenager when I first knew him, and we would get together and talk about stuff. And he told me about many of the things, you know, with his own father that he shared in public. I mean, I wouldn't have said it otherwise, but you know, he told me a lot about his life, and he was incredibly genuine person, you know. And yes, he did all the Soul Survivor stuff, but I don't think he was being disingenuous. I think he was really a good person. You know, I haven't seen him for a while, but I always enjoy talking to him when I meet him, and you know, So yeah, there is a machine, but there's also I think for us as individuals, we can take responsibility for our own selves and our own walk and our own
But
spirituality,
I'd want to
and
challenge.
not if we don't want to,
But I would challenge you a little bit on that. In that,
Okay.
I think that, like, if you think about the Scots at Anaheim Vineyard or whatever it's called now, or
Yeah.
Soul Survivor, or all of these big church, like newer church, almost
Yeah.
denominations, were built on the music stuff we've just been talking about. Mike Pilavarchi would never have got to anywhere near where he got to without Matt Redman creating that environment where a lot of young people were meeting with God in significant ways. He would never have had that platform. Vineyard and the various church leaders would built. I mean, arguably, Wimber built the entire thing on the music. Really, the experience that people would have through music. I totally agree with what you're saying in terms of the individual and their own relationship with God and them being answerable and all that stuff. But I think we have got a responsibility to talk about the role of what music has played. And I know we're not going to do that now because we've been talking for ages, but I think there is a bigger thing to challenge here. And and you get someone that's a narcissist who thinks, oh, I want to get out of this what I want to get out of it. And most of us can't even relate to what that sort of mind thinks like, whether they even understand what they're doing or they just do it because it's like a habit or but I think music has a lot to, like, the difference between you talking about Edna and her flute and Hilda and Martin, or whatever his name, who played drums in Kevin Prosh. I mean, the difference is pretty significant, right? And when was it Martin? Was that his name, the drummer?
Yeah, Martin's a good friend of mine. Yeah, Martin Neal. Yeah.
Yeah, Martin Neal, and what he would create just with the rhythms, you'd be like, holy moly, what is happening? I mean, I doubt the lady with the flute could do the same thing, right? So I think there is a massive.
Oh yeah.
You know, there's a massive. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, but this is an interesting thing, right? And I've had this accused. I've been accused of this as well. That I've literally had people pull me off of the stage, like literally, and say that you are drawing worship to yourself because the music is so good. I'm not blowing smoke or
No.
whatever, but it was really good, and people are saying, "Oh, that's too good. You're drawing worship to yourself, right?" Well, that is like such an insult to someone. It's like, so when we were born, my mother didn't find, as I came out of the womb, there wasn't a paper bag that she should put on the baby's head to make sure that baby doesn't shine in life, to make sure that they're not too charismatic or they're not too gifted or they're not too whatever. Like, God made us to shine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And if you're a good musician, you should just be a really good musician and be that. So there's that side of it. So yeah, sadly, if you like, narcissistic people, and let's face it, the church is full of leaders like that because it attracts that. Because you've got vulnerable people, and then you've got people who need vulnerable people and who use them. And my goodness, there's a liturgy of that that I could talk about. You know what I mean? Of people that I've known for sure. But at the same time, there is, I believe, a purity in those who are doing the art stuff. I'm just thinking about that. It's not their intention to take this whole thing off the rails. It's just to be as good as they possibly can at what they do, And sadly, people use that. I mean, you just think about pop stars. Think about George Michael, Amy Winehouse. You talk about any one of the amazingly talented people who were preyed upon by industry people who wanted to manipulate them and commercialize them and exploit them. Sadly, it's a human trait.
Yeah. So
and many musicians come from the church, like this is the sad part.
yeah,
Look
Coldplay.
at the amount of musicians that come from the church,
Yeah.
Because we're spiritual people, right?
So, and I think rather than keep talking for, I would love it if you could tell me a story of that represents what you're doing now. Tell me a story of what is it? So those things I totally hear you. I totally agree. But what is it that you're doing now or a story that represents what you're doing or what you want to be doing in 2025? That you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, so I do have a heart for people, really, at the end of the day. And I've realized that yeah, I love being an artist, I love being a musician, but I also really love being there for people. I like the thing of looking after people, pastoring people and stuff. And I really actually find that the art and the pastoral stuff go together really well. You know what I mean? And sadly, we don't see it enough, but it actually does. Like the act of leading worship is a pastoral act, I believe, because what you're doing, you're not just leading people to yourself. You're leading people to someone who actually can help them, right? That's the whole point of it. And when we lose that, that's when we've lost the whole point of what this thing is about. So as far as me and my son here, Lucas, we just kind of spearheading this thing in our community. It's called Metro Creative. And what we've done, we've recognized that there's some people who are homeless, some people who are housed, some people who are millionaires, some people who have nothing in our community. We're very rich in that sense, which is amazing. But we've recognized that everyone is an artist, everyone. Like art is an integral part of human existence. In First Nations culture, I live in Canada, as you know, in our culture here in First Nations culture, the indigenous people, they refer to God as creator.
Yeah.
That's who God is. God is called creator. And so when we think about the coming year and what we're doing here, if you want to try and create an environment where people, we're not thinking of like high art and low art, the talented, the whatever. Yes, we want to let people shine wherever they're at. If someone's a big star, be a big star. That's your calling in life. I'm glad I'm not, you know what I mean? But like a sense of like a place where people can come together and we can hear from other artists, we can explore creativity and healing and wholeness in art, because art is very intrinsically linked to our health, right, as well. If like you think about it, if we stop being creative, we become ill.
Right.
That's part of human nature. So one of our our big thing really as we're moving forward, we want to care for the physical needs of people that we have in our midst. So people struggling with their marriages or their relationships, their career things, whatever. People who are literally in addiction and whatever. There's a whole array of people, and but my particular bent is definitely to get them in touch with their creativity. So if you could come after this meeting to the karaoke thing and just hear these people who really have nothing,
Yeah,
just singing their hearts out, you know what I mean? And for that moment, they have life, they're like they have hope. That's really what like. Every time I do a gig, I say a little prayer and I just say, God, may it be that I can just bring hope to people in what I'm doing here. Like, you know what I mean? Even talking to you, I was thinking the reason why I wanted to do it, I thought I know so many artists and musicians who are just so hurt by what we've talked about.
Yeah.
You know? And you know, they didn't get picked to be the big star at the big conference and whatever, and you know, whatever, and they're just really been kicked around by people who, instead of caring for them, wanted to use them.
Yeah.
And that's like, let's face it, we haven't talked much about Jesus himself, but Jesus is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, rich in love. He forgives everybody. That's who that song is about. You know what I mean? Even though the Old Testament is full of those scriptures everywhere. Like, I literally printed off all the scriptures that today that have those verses in it. And here, like, you can't zoom in on them all, but there are like loads of verses that are all about God being gracious and compassionate and stuff. So if our kind of goal here is to try and be. Someone said to me the other day, do you preach about Jesus much? And we're like, well, yeah, we do. We give people food and stuff, and we, you know, and I think that's kind of what I want to be about, you know. And I do have creative aspirations of my own. I've just, like you said, I put out that video recently, which is a lament, and I've recently done a version of the Lord's Prayer that we're just going to put out soon and stuff. I have loads of ideas. I'm recording a blues album right now. You know, there's so many things I want to do personally, but in a community setting, I want to be someone who is a catalytic person, you know, bringing hope to people.
So to finish up then, we'll ask people if they would subscribe. I'll put a link to your YouTube channel as well, and to the church, so people can sort of find out what you do.
Yeah, they can see it. Yeah. We're a bunch of twits, you know, just trying to do it, really. You know, so we haven't really got much together, but we're trying, you know.
yeah. And thanks ever so much for just being taking a punt and having a chat with me. I really appreciate your time. It was really, really valuable. So thank you.
Thanks. And you too. I like what you're doing, and I love your heart, because you're not bitter, but you're being realistic and being integrous, and that's good. You know.
Thanks. Thank you. Have a lovely one. Have a good day. It's the end of mine, the beginning of yours. So have a lovely one. Yeah. And I hope the karaoke goes brilliantly.
Oh, it will. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Cheers, man.
Cheers. Thank you.